How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. So Bengals, Ravens, two teams I think we can expect once again to be making a push and appearance in the playoffs this season. Week 1 for the Ravens. The Ravens doing what the Ravens needed to do there, beating the Houston Texans pretty handedly. The Bengals, on the other hand, were, well, beaten pretty handedly by the Cleveland Browns. As Bengals fans, most of them are kind of, you almost get used to it at this point. You might as well just forget about those two games in a season because you're just going to get clobbered by the Browns or taken out by the Browns because the Browns just game plan out well. This season different. This season you got to give the Browns credit. Besides the fact that the Bengals like losing to them, they've been to the AFC Championship, the Super Bowl 2 straight years, and look ridiculous against the Browns. To put it short, they just don't look good. This season was different though. Burrow throws for under 100. Bengals don't even put up a touchdown. That Browns defense might be getting better. Already a really good defense against the pass, might be getting even better. Browns could be a really scary team to play this season. Nonetheless, we're going into week 2. And the Bengals coming out of that Browns game, of course, you're going to be thinking about that, a little bit worried from that standpoint. Joe Burrow, great bounce back player. Usually when he plays bad one game, he lights it up the next game. He's that kind of player, battles through the adversity really well. The Baltimore Ravens might not be so worried about how they played week 1, maybe a little bit. But they might not be too worried about how they played week 1. But I'll tell you what they are going to be worried about is these injuries. It's feeling like, it was it 2 years ago now? It's feeling like it all, or is it 2 years last year? Feeling like it all is 2 years ago, right? All over again with this defense, this, guys going down. It was 2 years ago. And this is, again, big for the Bengals, I guess, here. It was 2 years ago when you seen Humphrey and Peters go down. And the Ravens defense, it was in a world of trouble, as you can expect. You had your all-pro CBs out there, two guys you really leaned on, not out there anymore. That was a game changer, and we've seen it with the Bengals, especially here when they played. Joe Burrow put up 525 and 416 in those two games that season. Last season, once again, now the Bengals Ravens, they split the series one apiece. Burrow is back down to around 200 passing yards a game. So those guys in the lineup, out of the lineup, game changing. The series between the two last season, I would bring up Bengals won at home, Ravens won at home. Ravens lost the game in Cincinnati without Mark Andrews. Bengals lost the game in Baltimore without T. Higgins. So both teams missing a big playmaker on offense in said losses. But again, closer to fuller strength for both teams in the playoffs, and the Bengals took that one. The Bengals and Joe Burrow, who have not lost to the Baltimore Ravens at home under the Joe Burrow regime here. The Bengals 7-1 last season at home. All of a sudden, the only loss was the overtime loss to the Steelers week 1, where they just did not look prepared, much like they didn't look like they was prepared week 1 this season. Besides that, it was tough to play at home, or it's tough for visitors to come visit Paycor Stadium and play these Cincinnati Bengals. Looking like again the home field advantage starting to kick in for these Bengals. Nonetheless, I want to touch up on these injuries because Baltimore. The reason we brought it up. With the Peters, with the Humphrey, with the injuries, just bombarding this defense, which should have been an elite defense, and the injuries just kept coming. You hate to say it for the Ravens. Does it feel like it's coming again? Let's start on the offense. You have Linderbaum, you have Stanley, two really good offensive linemen, both week to week, which would make you think, good chance they don't play this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. You have Marcus Williams, torn pec. He's not going to play. He's not going to play. He's going to miss multiple games. But thankfully for the Ravens fans, Harbaugh said, hey, it sounds like he's going to come back later in the season. I don't think he'll be out for the season. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, no Peters anymore out in Vegas. Humphrey didn't play last game. They say there's a chance he plays this week. We'll see how he progresses. But that's some big losses. You take that's your secondary. Your three top guys in the secondary out the door from last season, potentially not playing. Again, we talked about how the Bengals played when these guys lost their two CBs. You take away your vet, your safety net up there at safety that, again, plays really well. And you bring in somebody else. I mean, there's going to be some holes in a couple of them possibly for the Bengals to exploit this week if they can protect the quarterback. And I think what's more important here is the narrative's changed in Baltimore, Cincinnati. Again, the Bengals now 4-1 in the last 5 against the Ravens, but it wasn't always like that. When the Ravens had their full complementary defense here, everybody was healthy playing, it was ugly. It was really ugly for the Bengals. It didn't look like they had a prayer against the Baltimore Ravens. And the reason for that is because you watch the way this defense likes to play, and especially the way they played against Burrow, and it worked. because of the talent they had in that secondary, because of the talent of those defensive backs. They had the ability to go play one-on-one with some Bengals receivers and blitz the quarterback, put pressure on the quarterback in the Bengals offensive line. A weakness, obviously, during those seasons, and the Bengals just couldn't move the football. And the Ravens are flat out dominating games. Now, again, different story because they don't have that luxury anymore. I don't think they do. I think the Bengals know they don't. I think the Ravens know they don't. They can try it, but the real thing is when last time they tried that, as we've seen, Burrow put up 525. So we see the game plan kind of shift a little bit for the Baltimore Ravens against the Bengals because they know they can't afford to do that anymore. And you're losing these guys, that's falling in the Bengals' favor. Last week, it felt like one of those games where everything that could go wrong did go wrong for the Bengals, even leading up to the game. Like, hey, you're playing the Browns entering week 1. Haven't beaten the Browns in Cleveland in quite some time. You start out slow out the gate because you don't play in a preseason. It was dumping rain. It was going to be a ground and pound kind of game. Everything seemed to go against them. This week, it almost feels the opposite where, hey, a lot of things are going against the Ravens here, and it's gonna be a tough matchup for the Ravens. It's gonna be a great test for this Bengals offensive line now. Stroud was sacked 5 times last game, I should say, by this Baltimore Ravens pass rush. Again, they like to bring the pressure. We'll see what they do this week. You could do that a little bit more against a young rookie quarterback. Baltimore Ravens, hey, speaking of young rookies, how about Zay Flowers last week? Zay Flowers. Looking impressive. How many times have we entered a season hearing about, Bateman coming in or wasn't Bateman, what was the guy's name? Hollywood Brown, these number ones, the Ravens bringing these receivers and saying, hey, this is it. This is the guy that's going to be Lamar's number one. Finally going to get that good top pass weapon. And, they never came to fruition. Zay Flowers last week, though, they drafted this guy in the first round, and boy, did he look good. It looks like he could truly be that number one. Lamar has really been lacking since being a Baltimore Raven. You couple him with Mark Andrews. If Mark Andrews can, again, another guy, Mark Andrews can play. It sounds like Mark Andrews is going to play. It sounds like we're going to see. Harbaugh said he's been looking good. We'll see how he doesn't practice this week. I would assume, again, not in the building. I would assume if Andrews had to play last week, there's probably a chance. They said, hey, it's the Houston Texans. We're not going to push things week 1. No, we need this guy the entire season. We're not going to force it. But you get to week 2 and you say, hey, all right, how you feeling, Mark? Yeah, 95%. We got the Bengals this week. We need to win this game. Come on in. So I would expect Andrews to play. We'll see, barring any setbacks. And that's obviously a big return in addition for the Baltimore Ravens. The Andrews, the Bengals just typically really give up some yards to the tight end. Andrews typically plays very well against the Cincinnati Bengals. We could see more of that again this week. Could be interesting, though. You're down a couple linemen. Do you see Andrews run a few less routes possibly here? We'll see. Depending on how offensive line plays. If the Bengals can get home, get some pressure on the quarterback, that'll be key. Meanwhile, speaking of offensive lines, we flip it to the other side. How's this Bengals offensive line going to play? We've talked about it. I think we talked about it last season. It's going to be, give it 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to take some time for this offensive line to gel, and they struggled to start the season. We got halfway through the season. They started to play better. We're at game 2. They got 2 new tackles. Williams not really new, just shifting to a new position. You bring in Orlando Brown Jr. Again, a different situation than last season. You brought in a bunch of guys, completely reshuffled offensive line. This season, the core of your offensive line, the interior of your offensive line has some chemistry. They've gelled a little bit. I still think, again, slow start. We ain't seen the full potential of this offensive line. I still think, it's a 2 to 4 week process for this offensive line. Last week, tough to judge. They've seen some interior lapses. They did get some pressure on the quarterback, but again, it was dumping rain, and it's not the best ideal situation for an offensive line when you're sliding backwards trying to grab that or get some grip on there with a 300-pound man trying to run you over, to say the very least. So we'll see what happens from that standpoint. Of course, the better Bengals protect Joe Burrow, the more and more likely the Bengals win this football game. I think that's going to be the key to this football game. Matter of fact, is if the Baltimore Ravens can get pressure on Joe Burrow and maintain coverage on this receivers corps, which personally I don't think they can. I don't see it happening. It's kind of prove it. It's a prove it game for me if you're the Baltimore Ravens. There's just too many injuries. There's too many guys not here that used to be here that were big pieces to the Baltimore Ravens and his defense slowing down Joe Burrow. And of late, they've had a hard time slowing him down. I think the Bengals, on the other hand, they've done a great job of really containing Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm not going to say, he's still getting his yardage, but it doesn't feel like he's running all over the Bengals of late like he does some teams. And They can do that again this week for some second and longs, third and longs. I think the Bengals will be all right. Baltimore gonna again likely depend on a run. We'll see. Yeah, probably depend on a run game still quite often. I think it's interesting because of the offensive line. It's interesting because J.K. Dobbins went down, but then I thought, J.K. Dobbins don't ever play, which is tough because as a Buckeye, I really want to see that guy come out here, light it up, and succeed. Like man, he can't catch a break. He's out the season again. Achilles this time. That's tough. So we're going to see some Hill. We're going to see some Edwards back there. Hill had a couple touchdowns last week. Edwards started to look a little bit better later in the game. We'll see how they do this week against the Bengals. Overall, though, again, I don't think this Baltimore Ravens secondary can keep up the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow is going to bounce back this game. It's a home game for the Bengals. I think it's a Bengals team that gets back on track, and I think the Bengals win this one 27-20. Love you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.